Good morning and welcome. Welcome to this our second conversation on this glorious day, O Dia de Conciencia Negra, Black Consciousness Day being celebrated in Brazil today. And again, we're standing in solidarity. We're sending our love across the waters to our friends, our families, our brothers and sisters across there in Brazil. It's my pleasure to introduce the second conversation for you, the Pataki and African spirituality, being led by Mr. Rawle Gibbons. Mr. Rawle Gibbons is a playwright, director, and educator, having taught both at the School of Drama in Jamaica and at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, where he was the founding coordinator of the Center of Creative and Festival Arts. His directing credits include C.L.R. James, The Black Jacobins, Temple in the Sea, Shango, Tales of the Orishas, Derek Walcott's Drum and Colors, and Nation Dance, The Pilgrimage. He has published 2 volumes of his plays, Calypso Trilogy, Love Trilogy. And in 2014, Mr. Gibbons founded the Caribbean Yard Campus, a network for the development of Indigenous Caribbean education. He's currently leading this project. And so it's my pleasure, my privilege to hand you over to Mr. Rawle Gibbons. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Let's begin with a libation. Ready? Eshu Barakbo.
Eshu Barakbo Mojuba. Are. Eshu Barakbo Mojuba. Atamade Kori Eshu Barakbo. Mojuba Elekba Eshu Lona. Eshu Barakbo Mojuba. Are. Eshu Barakbo Mojuba. Atamade Kori Eshu Barakbo. Mojuba Elekba Eshu Lona. Eshu Barakbo Mojuba. Are, Eshu Barakbo Mojuba. Atamade Kori Eshu Barakbo. Mojuba Elekba Eshu Lona.
We greet Eshu, the guardian of opportunity. We ask that you open the doorway to our conversation, the doorway of perception, the doorway of knowledge, the doorway of truth. We greet the Orisha of today, the owner of this day, Orumila, the deity of wisdom, of truth. We ask that our conversation be calm, be clear, and that the fruits of our conversation at the end of our little discourse enhance our understanding and bring us all closer to truth. We greet our ancestors, the ancestors of each of us, and we pause for a minute for each of us to acknowledge the presence here in your space of your ancestors. We greet the ancestors of our region, of our Caribbean space. We greet the first people, all the various nations of the first people, Taino, Kalinago, the Garifuna, all who occupied and inhabited this first region and who resisted colonization. We greet our ancestors who resisted, who were brought here from Africa and who resisted and fought against that colonization. We greet all those Maroons of Jamaica, Suriname, all those who founded the Palenques and in Cuba, all who founded the Quilombos. We honor today in particular Zumbi in Brazil. We greet our ancestors who built and sought to build alternative civilizations that began with Haiti. The heroes of Haiti, from Macandal, Boukman, Toussaint, Dessalines, Christophe, Pétion. We greet Marcus Garvey, continued that work of building. We greet Amy Césaire, Fanon, CLR James, Kwame Ture, Eric Williams, and all who engaged in the work of building a civilization in the Caribbean. Our artists, our musicians, our calypsonians, all our creatives. Great. And we recognize that we stand on the shoulders of the work of all these ancestors, and that nothing can be achieved without this acknowledgement. So, welcome again. And I want to thank the organizers of the Black Consciousness Festival for this event. We all know what it takes to organize anything of any scale, really, in the region. It's a great effort, tremendous effort. Particularly important at this time where we have seen a number of movements toward the reawakening of Black consciousness. We've seen the movement toward reparations. It started here in the Caribbean. We have seen the Black Lives Movement in America, and of course it spread throughout the world. We have seen the Crossroads Movement, the movement to reclaim our history by removing and replacing symbols of domination, which we've accepted for so long. All this has come together in this particular time, over this COVID period. So this is the appropriate time for us to speak about Black consciousness, investigate what it means, and where we could go from here. This is just one conversation in several conversations, and we are on the area of our spirituality. To do so, I would like to introduce conversationalists. We have Janique Dennis, first off, right? Janique, yes, yes. Greetings, Janique. Janique is an Orisha practitioner.
Of course.
Also an academic and a performer. She coordinates and teaches in the writing program at the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine. She's also a PhD candidate, looking at the tradition of oral Yoruba narratives, Pataki, in the diaspora. Right? And in doing that, she's examining those narratives in Trinidad and Tobago, in Brazil, and in Cuba. Well placed in terms of the scope of this particular conversation. Joining her, we have Ade, Ola, Adam, Pascal. All right. Adam is also an Orisha practitioner and a performing artist. I've worked with him on a number of events. He's performed in my plays, and I've seen his work as a director. He's a dancer. He's one of these complete performers. He's a dancer, choreographer, director, singer, right? And probably a few other things there that I haven't yet called, but he's expanding all the time. But he's very much a complete performer and a friend as well. At the moment, he's in Ireland at the University of Limerick, the Irish World Academy. This is the specific institute for music and dance, where he's looking at what is called ethno-choreology and his own original Orisha-based technique that he calls Oribata. Okay. Now, from both our guests, our friends here, I prefer to say friends, we will hear more about what they're doing. Okay. But I just want to chart the conversation, because I know there'll be questions, and when the questions come, they can be relevant to what we are saying. Okay. The conversation will be charted like this. We are going to explore, first part, the notion of Black consciousness. We just want to get a response. This is not an entirely, of course, academic conversation. The value of what we're doing is about our own experience. So we talk a little bit about Black consciousness. And then we will engage each participant, each of our friends, about their specific journey. How have they arrived at where they are now in terms of a spiritual path, so that we can share our stories. The next stop, we will discuss the work that you're doing, right? Bring us all on board. Let us know what to expect when you come out of this phase. Finally, we want to look at, in terms of where we can go from here. We want to explore some of the challenges that we face and perhaps what we see as we move ahead, your ideas on some of that. So that's the overall map of our discussion today. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so let's start with the idea of Black consciousness. Let's just throw that out. I'd like to talk about the topic of the festival, the name of the festival actually. What does it mean? What does it mean to you? That's what I'd like to find out. Janique?
I'm going to try to divorce it just a touch from the PhD, because we're going to get into the PhD in a little bit.
Yeah.
Thinking in a broader sense, when I think of Black consciousness, I think about a sense of identity and self that is or wrapped in love. That we love who we are and what we've come to be, that we love the journey that has led to who we are, all the terrible parts and all the sacrifices along the way, and that we share this love with each other, that we love each other because we recognize each other as fellow travelers along the way. It has to be, it's like the first Odu, that's based on finding a love that is attached to the quote unquote most high Olodumare, and that having that love guide our decisions. So when I think about Black consciousness, I think about us finding this place, being in this intellectual, spiritual, and ultimately physical space in which we are free to love ourselves and unburdened, recognizing that this is a result of we're just reveling in all the potential that is here, just waiting.
Right. So it's a space in which we recognize the ancestors and of the ancestors and our own spirit, our own recognition of spirit at the center that that is expanded to the love of the whole community, as it were.
Correct.
It's a place of love.
It's a place of love.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Adi?
Yes. Greetings to all. And I must first say, it's really a privilege to have this opportunity to be on this panel and have this discussion on Black consciousness. Black consciousness to me, when I think of Black consciousness, I think of being awake, being aware as a person, being aware of yourself, your journey, your path, your history. And this awareness brings about a type of identity itself. It brings about a type of identity with purpose, understanding where you come from in one sense, where you are, and where you probably need to go, as opposed to want to. Being awake is that consciousness, knowing and also understanding. So when I think of Black consciousness, I think of all these ideas, and most importantly, what this consciousness can contribute to humanity and society. Apart from you as an individual, this consciousness, how can you share this consciousness? How can you help others to become awakened or conscious? So then it takes me into purpose. What is my purpose as being conscious? And all these things are what I see as Black consciousness.
Yeah, beautiful. So in a way, what we're talking about here is both yourself and Janique have said. One is the connection that is ancestral, the connection with the past in that sense, right? You've also talked about the historical knowledge required, being able to situate oneself, not only spiritually, ancestrally, but also in terms of time, right? And in that way, finding a purpose, and the awareness that purpose allows us to embrace beyond ourselves into all said humanity.
Yeah.
What is the meaning of our consciousness for humanity, right? And situating ourselves within that. I think that says it for really when we look at all those different parts.
Yeah.
The sense of ancestry, the sense of history, and the obligation community to move beyond oneself, I think. Yes, Janique, is that you?
Yes, I agree completely with what Adeola is saying as well. His idea. What I really love about the way you summarized it is it leads directly into our PhDs. because this is why we are doing what we are doing, because of our recognition of our histories, our love and acceptance of ourselves and our ancestors, and because we're seeing that path, that journey to where we can take it to another level to help our society and to help our people and to expand this awakening that is right now. Yeah, I think it's
so in essence, consciousness is life, and it's actually living, you know, because I mean, it's like using the terminology walking dead, you know, it's something that exists in society, even with our people. So for me, consciousness is living, and not just life, but living. Being alive is one thing, but living I see as happening, you know?
Right, right. That's a very useful reference too, because, you know, Marcus Garvey spoke about the African race in the diaspora in particular as being asleep, right? Being in a state of slumber.
Yeah.
And the need, of course, for that spiritual and that consciousness, the awakening of consciousness about our condition. And of course, with that, as you said, activity, doing something about. Yeah. So, okay.
I think the only point of distinction that I would make is that awakening has to be one of love. I find that love is central to us being our highest self, and therefore being able to make the most far-reaching and profound impact because of love of self and love of others. So awakening into who we are and loving the process and what we find.
Right.
Really important, because there's a possibility of having the awakening and almost being bitter when you are awoken and you realize the truth, quote unquote, of the history and who we are. I think it's really important that we love this beautiful journey we're on with all its twists and turns. I think it's extremely important.
I agree totally. And I could even go a little beyond or make it even a little more broad, and not just say love and understanding what that is. I could even go a little broader and just thinking about sensitivity, all our senses being active, you know, because we have these senses, you know, even as spiritual people, we have all our senses are not only physical, but they are also spiritual. So I think that the consciousness also is an activation of that sensitivity and spiritual senses being active and working.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
Go ahead. Good. Yeah, and the lesson, both lessons, the lesson of love is particularly important. I mean, when we look at the people who have been so significant in terms of their statements, the prophets and the artists and so on, that has been central to it. I mean, I think of Bob Marley, for instance. And the message of love, you know, and these are it goes alongside the consciousness, the historical consciousness. That doesn't remove love. I think that is the capacity that we all find in African expression, Black expression. The fact that, I mean, look at Mandela, for instance. And after all that, still being able to say, let us open the society, let's live in an open society. One of revenge. Look at Stalin. You know, if nobody's with all the problems that Africans may have, right? If I can't love them, who is to love them? That's what Stalin says. So I think that message is well worth bearing, reminding us about Janique. The idea, Adiola, that we an active process.
Yes.
And we should feel with all our senses. Okay?
Yes.
It's not romantic and abstract. Okay, it's political, it's ideological, it's political.
Yeah, it's pragmatic.
And it's pragmatic, yes.
Yeah,
Takes
pragmatic.
us forward. Takes us forward.
Relative.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So, and that's a good point at which we could segue into the next section where we're talking about your own spiritual journeys now. How are you? Well, I didn't just that he was born he grew up with drums and so on. So his journey might be one that has been charted from childhood. But Janique, we'd like to hear about yours and about mine as well.
Alice might be. You might want
Where will you start? Adi, you want to start with this one or what?
Well, I grew up in a spiritual home, a spiritual Baptist home. And my grandmother would have been the focal point or the backbone of that experience growing up. Out of all my grandmother's grandchildren, I was the one that she would take to church most of the time. I would be the grandchild that she would take with her, you know. So I grew up going to church and hearing adoption and seeing these women in the different colored dresses and broad belts, men with long gongs and sticks and the shouting, and I don't understand what that is. But in growing up, I would always, it's like a feeling of knowing, yet I don't know. It's a feeling, something that is innate, you know, and I think I began to adopt, I should say, some of these characteristics and the movements, the singing and everything. So I began learning spiritual things in a very oral way. I could remember within the faith, there was always this designated area that children couldn't go to. I didn't know what it was at the point in time. And I would always find myself curious and would go by the door and try to peep and try to look, because something inside of there, I feel as though I need to know or connect to, or, you know, and my curiosity took me to hearing and seeing things that I probably would describe as magical, you know. And when I grew older, I would then would have realized what that was about. So I grew up as a spiritual Baptist, and we had no interaction of the Orisha tradition. We had nothing, I never heard a Yoruba drumming, Yoruba singing up until the age of maybe 12 or 13. But I would always have dreams or visions, as they say, and saying that, not to stray from it, it's something that has also been sort of stripped away from our people, in the sense of believing or identifying with those types of aesthetics of self, dreams and visions, you know. So yeah, I would always have dreams and visions, and I would have these experiences within my dreams that were Orisha that I didn't know of, and I would go to my grandmother and I would say, Granny, you know, I dreamed this, and I saw this tall bamboo with this red cloth, and there was this man there, and you know, this black man, the African man, and you know, and he's talking to me, but I don't understand what he's saying. It's a different language, and I would always share with her, and she would just laugh and she would smile. I would never get a response, you know. And later on, that told me, I'm trying to kind of condense the journey. Later on, that would have then told me that there's a story why my grandmother would not have expressed certain things about it, as though she never knew about it. And one day driving, I had a event to fulfill, I should say, and driving home with my grandmother, she decided to talk, and she was like, you know, I just remember when people used to just come through the bush, all I used to see was the fire, the flames flickering from the flambeau. I didn't know how they used to find the way. Maybe it was the drum, or maybe it was the fire, maybe it was the smoke, but it just used to come, and Daddy, he know they was coming. And what I didn't like was cleaning the fowl and the chicken in the morning. And everybody in the car listening to Granny like, what Granny talking about? We never had heard of these things. But because my grandmother identified that her grandchild and by extension her grandchildren were now experiencing this type of awakening of consciousness within their spiritual self, her own spirit started to make the connection for us. Maybe unconsciously to her, maybe she didn't know. And then the story and the history came out. So that my grandmother's parents would have been people who would have held different ceremonies and rituals that was Orisha. And her grandparents would have been the pure Africans that would have come through our Middle Passage story. And so the traditions came with them through that process. And that is how I inherited this consciousness of Orisha. And there is where the acknowledgement came. And then out of that curiosity, I began to make my own investigations and progress within the tradition.
Okay. You talk about spiritual practice and Orisha. Right? A little bit about what the difference is really, because some people do get confused by the two.
When you say that again, spiritual
Baptist, spiritual Baptist, and Orisha. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between the two and similar to that matter?
Well, spiritual Baptist in Trinidad and Tobago is a blend or a mixture of Christianity and African tradition. African traditions. Within the spiritual Baptist faith, there are elements that you can recognize or can be identified that came from different African groups or groupings that would have come to Trinidad and Tobago. So the base of the spiritual Baptist faith is African in essence, but inside of it there is the element of Christianity or Catholicism. And this would have come out of the journey and the history of the people. You know, the idea of a mass tradition, mass in the context of survival and preservation. So in essence, our ancestors took what was placed upon them or forced upon them in some essence and found a way in which to continue their way of acknowledging and worshiping and communicating with God, the Creator, or Olodumare, or whichever name they would have known to connect to God through whichever African group and tradition, which I find to be brilliant. And I honor that. I honor the intelligence and the brilliance of my ancestors to be able to take what was placed, what was given, what was forced onto them, and to develop a way, a process in which to manifest their own truth behind and within all of that. That is brilliant. And in doing that, that brought about more or less the development of the spiritual Baptist faith, along with the history of the Americans in Trinidad and Tobago, which also brought these elements of spiritual Baptist within our society. So spiritual Baptist is African in a sense, combined with elements of Christianity, Catholicism, and that's one thing. Orisha, on the other hand, does not, it's nowhere based in Christianity. It doesn't stem from Christianity. It doesn't hide itself behind Christianity. It doesn't use Christianity to exist. It exists on its own as an entity. However, within Trinidad and Tobago, we have different terms to identify a group or groups of persons. One of the terms that we use or would have been used is the Shango Baptist. And why would that be? And it was because of the same idea of masking. So in essence, it developed a unique form or evolution of Orisha in Trinidad, where we have this masked type of tradition or synchronized element of this tradition in Trinidad and Tobago. Yet Orisha of itself is still separate. But for me, in my opinion, the tradition, the Orisha tradition in Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension, the Caribbean, Brazil, Cuba, the diaspora, is children of Ifa, or children of the original tradition, so to speak, or the place or the source, you know. So I believe that the traditions in Trinidad and Tobago, Orisha is a child of Ifa, so to speak, you know, an evolution, which I hold reverence to and respect dearly because of the sacrifices, because to understand it, even though Orisha and Baptist is different, they both bear the same sacrifices in order to exist and to be preserved as a tradition and culture. They were beaten, they were locked up, they were banned, their instruments, no tools, no paraphernalia, nothing. And they had to, you know, find ways to exist. And that's kind of like the story of the spiritual Baptist and the Orisha. So within the spiritual Baptist faith, you would find that there are many individuals who are Orisha devotees, but they came through this channel of the mask and somehow then evolved into a more pure form of Orisha, so to speak. And so that's my understanding of Orisha and spiritual Baptist differences, yet so linked because of these historical events and what would have taken place with our ancestors.
Yeah. Thank you. Very good. Thank you very much. Do you, given these similarities, common and common elements in some of the rituals and so on, as you said, do you think that the fact that your grandmother didn't want to speak about it, was that a reflection of the feeling, the attitude toward Orisha at that particular time? Has it changed later on? Do people feel differently? Why do you think your grandmother, in other words?
Right, so, well, I must say my grandmother is now my ancestor, so Mujubai Gungun, and I actually in this conversation. I strongly believe my grandmother grew up in Las Lomas, and that's where her father and mother would have settled with land. I learned that my grandfather, my great-grandfather, was a taskmaster, and he took on the name Shakon because that would have been the name his parents would have taken on from their slave master. So Shakon is the name that he took on, and they would have had a farm, and my great-grandfather would have practiced secretly these African traditions. I believe in that time when my grandmother was a young girl, a young person, there would have been a type of stigmatization, and which which we would still identify to some extent presently. So my grandmother moved out of Las Lomas. She moved out of the country and she came to town. Right? She came to Port of Spain, Lavantil, to be exact. And she became what is called a converted Baptist, which probably would have been the most acceptable way to practice whatever idea she knew of her African self. And it maybe felt safe and acceptable with the idea of Christianity as what spiritual Baptist would have been a combination of. And she never told us. So I believe she may not have expressed that, but I believe it would have been those types of ideas that would have affected her not telling us. So she sort of left that and tried to grow us up as spiritual Baptists. But because of what consciousness is, connecting to existence, you can't stop existence from existing. So in time, whatever is the purpose or the function of that consciousness and its existence is going to come up. And it came up. It came up, and myself and my generation are the products of that awakening and that consciousness.
Yeah. Spirit is indeed irrepressible. Yes. Yeah. Janique?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was fascinating. What was your like?
I'm going to make mine really brief. My mother, Anne-Marie Teresa Arno Thomas Warner, she's in here somewhere, thought it would be a good idea for us to be exposed to everything. So we went to a Presbyterian church for most of our childhood. I attended a private Muslim school where I studied Islam. I then passed common entrance. I went to a convent where I studied Catholicism. I then went on to study the Seventh-day Adventists and their belief system. I baptized into that. It was a journey of seeking and searching for a sense of fulfillment spiritually. And ultimately, I found Ifa. Ifa chose me. And I started to pursue that actively. Yeah. So I have to give great thanks and respect to the Ile in Santa Cruz, where I was introduced to a lot of what I understand as the foundation, my foundation for Ifa now. And then, so I would be based in Trinidad, and the Babalawo time would have been Nigerian. And then I took a trip to Cuba. It is a vast difference the way communities operate regarding Ifa in Trinidad and Ifa in Cuba. The normalcy is mind-blowing, just mind-blowing. So since that, I've been following Ifa with all the resources from all the paths that have been opened, like a proper issue child. Open, how shall we walk?
Indeed. That your mention of Cuba is so interesting. That's also the connection point in my own, you know, I grew up in Catholic Church and so on, Anglican and Catholic and whatnot, but again, always seeking. And when I sort of encountered Orisha in an ideological and performative way, my only religion was really theater. I didn't choose anything else. It was theater. Theater was the religion, you know. I was asked to speak about Orisha because I had looked at it in terms of theater. Doing that, one thing led to the next. And I was asked to present the paper in Cuba. When I went to Cuba, I mean, it was a quantum leap in terms of the understanding of the thing. I mean, and suddenly you realize that here was a community that you belong to. Although my Spanish was sixth form Spanish, I could understand the language, if you will, of the rituals, the language.
Yes.
Right? We spoke a common language in terms of Orisha, but it's simply that in Cuba, it was no longer a backyard tradition. It was, as you say, and as normal as cricket or in terms of our culture, or baseball. Right? It is normal conversation. And that I found to be pretty mind-blowing. And that is what brought me back here. I decided that I needed to become initiated into Orisha first, you know. I was really led in terms of that, more ideological first, ideologically second, and in the course of initiation, encountering spirit.
Yeah.
Right, which changed the journey, changed the nature of the journey into what it is today. Yeah? Ade, I think you sorry?
We give thanks.
Give thanks. We give thanks.
We arrived and where we are, and we still on the road. Thanks.
Yeah. These are the journeys, you know. These are the journeys. I mean, not all of us really just grew up in the thing. But I mean, and this is the fascinating thing about Trinidad in terms of your own journey, Janique. I mean, the fact that one is exposed to everything. One is exposed to so much, you know.
Yeah.
You know, one can be like Ade, grew up specifically dealing with African spiritual tradition. And on the other hand, outside of that community, you can be exposed to everything. But the fascinating thing about all of this is that within the African tradition, whether it's Baptist or Orisha, you already that the energy of inclusivity. In other words, we are always seeking to embrace
love
in that. Ashe, love.
Always seeking to
love. Yeah. You go to a Baptist church, you go to an Orisha shrine, you see elements there of Hinduism. References to Muslim in terms of some of the deities, right? And of course, the Christianity is there. So,
current tellings of the Odu reference Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, the way the Babalawo tell it now, they see it all as children of Ifa.
It is there. It is there. It is
there. Everything, all of it belongs to Ifa.
Yes.
There's no distinction.
That's right. That's right. And what we've done here in the Caribbean is that we have made that a reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Made it a reality so that one can flow easily from one to the next.
Yeah.
And be whatever you want to be.
Yeah.
I you know, and the notion of masking, which I did picked up on, is so important. And what I've also come to recognize is that what happened here can also be seen as an unmasking, in the sense that when we identify with the Orisha, with the various Catholic saints, in fact, we are unmasking those saints, because so much of the history of the church, of the Catholic Church, is really about adopting and adapting a lot of what they meant. It's very. Yeah, we tend to think about the church as monolithic, but it's really very much a syncretic
pantheon.
Gone through. It is taken from all kinds of sources, you know, that were indigenous to Europe, some of which came out of North Africa initially, but were indigenous to Europe as well. Yes, you know, and in the struggle to create, as it were, a lot of these things were adopted. And what has happened in the Caribbean really is our unmasking. When we identify with those things, we identify with the original forces as well. You know? Yeah. Masking, taking away the thing. Yeah. So I see that process also being important to us.
Brilliant.
Okay. Yeah.
Just mine.
I can see that truth. Yes, Mr. Gibbons.
Yeah, I mean, there have been several documentaries because the Kemetic system has been chiseled in stone, and it's impossible to attempt to ignore or erase it. It's quite easy, and there have been several studies done that show the direct correlation between the Kemetic pantheon and the, for example, the Christian base. So it's yeah, it's just to say it like that. It's why I'm giving my respects to Rawle Gibbons. It's something I need more courage in my. I'm still walking on eggshells as I go.
Yeah. But the evidence is there.
Is there?
Yeah.
Is there?
Okay. Well, let's talk a little about what you're doing now and how some of these ideas perhaps play out in your work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we talk about that?
Sure, of course. That's always.
Yeah. Well, Janique seems to be eager to start on that one.
Of course, this is I'm
well, let's go.
It's very exciting for me. So when I was introduced to Ifa in Trinidad, during the divination, about the upon Ifa, the Babalawo during the divination, and in the Odu would call on the Pataki. They would tell these stories to help whoever the client or the clients to understand the meaning of the Odu and how to interpret them and to apply them. And I found, because I'm into literature, I've always been into literature. My master's was in literature. I found them fascinating. And then I went to Cuba and I heard the Pataki of the two-faced issue, and it was a different story. I went, what just happened there? The version I heard in Trinidad, up in Santa Cruz, by Shangawobi, was that he had passed between two friends and they had fought. And when they fought, they were told that you were told to make your ebo to a shoe, and they made their ebo, and all was well in the world. The one I heard in Cuba, he passed between two villages at a market, and they slaughtered everybody, and everybody died. Everybody. I was like, what happened to the story?
Right.
Obsessed with looking at the way the Pataki moved. How it moved from one place to another, from one time to another, from one language to another. So there was a reference Adiola was making earlier about the source being Yoruba. Once upon a time, the source was Yoruba. Right now, the source is global. We are global. And we, all of us, because slavery occurred, all of us have pieces of a story, versions of a story, our own realities. And this is what my PhD is doing. It's proving the presence of the Pataki, the stories of the Orisha, not the sacred oracles of Ifa, the stories of the Orisha, which we have more, shall we say, flexibility with, more free play, more literary license, etc. And the way that this work has impacted literature in Trinidad and Tobago, in Brazil, and in Cuba. So that means studying, of course, the three languages, Portuguese, Spanish, and English and Trinidadian Creole. So I am postulating my own theory about a continuum called the Pataki continuum. And I'm saying that I believe it's plausible that once I can map this, it'll be possible to map similar continuums, some similar ancient systems. So the Nordic, the Greece, etc., and be able to look at the way their stories are changed over time and across languages and across places, and the way they're imbibed, even without an awareness. That whole, it's in the marrow, the history in the marrow, within our the echo in the bone, within our souls, that manifest whether we know what we're doing or not. But if there is an awareness of your quote-unquote source, Pataki in this case, your source stories in others, then it's able to identify those parallels when they arise in other literature, and to see how they're re-emerging after having been submerged. It's like you're saying, the unmasking, how they're re-emerging now that we are in an environment and a time when we can be.
Yeah.
No need to mask. So we can tell our stories how we want to tell our stories. Where our protagonist is a little black short man who loves a piece of mischief. And I have an uncle that looks just like how that song, you know, and we can see ourselves of the Orisha. And you can see our humanity in the fantasy of the Orisha and in their own stories, because the Orisha Pataki are not at all like quite a lot of the other stories of other religions where they are presented as saints. No, the Orisha lives. The Orisha live, and they live a whole set of bacchanal that we can relate to on a very human level. And go, yeah, well, if over could cut off, she left here, so she man, who is we?
Right,
you know, right. I think that's really a beautiful contribution that I could make to this awakening of the Black consciousness right now, and not just showing us the way the stories are being presented in this multimedia 21st century age, but also in our poetry, in our plays, in our novels across the region, really. But I had to, delimit.
Yeah, of course.
For a while. And the Pataki continuum is the theory, but there's actually a methodology about how to track it. So I have a numerical formula called the trichord formula, where I plot on a chart because issue resides in a multiverse, and issue is the base for the philosophy and the methodology. So there are three worlds, issue's number, of course, being 3. So we look at the story world, the literary world, and I just slowed down. And the, oh my gosh, the telling world. So we look at the world inside the stories or the literature where it exists. We look at what's happening in the literary environment, the publishing environment, what's happening with the authors and whatnot. And we look at what's happening in the spiritual environment and what's happening in the Ile at the time of the tellings, and we line those up to actually create a triangulation to pinpoint on the Pataki continuum from the quote-unquote source Pataki to where this text is now, and then you can do a triangulation from that text to others and look at the texts in the diaspora are transforming, moving, changing, and of course, hopefully, ultimately, be able to predict where the texts are going. We might be coming just full circle to Pierre Verger, Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It's going to be very, very exciting because now we're seeing movies coming out, Shango, Orisha, and such. So we seem to be coming to that pole, that center again, and it's very, very exciting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that continuum that you're talking about, it's what we are witnessing is people making their own gods. Every people make their gods. Gods that look like them, that respond to them. So the phenomenon is really a shaping of our gods coming for our experience as distinguished from the original that was the community. So it has its own kind of validity. Okay, in that sense. And Ade talked about that innate recognition he felt when he was a child in the Baptist church and so on. And you're saying, look, there are all kinds of ways of knowing this thing. We don't necessarily have to know the literature, but we identify with something in it. All right, that speaks to us.
Yeah.
And that innate perception, if you will, I think is key to our sense of the world and our sense of community, dreams and so on. So yeah,
it changes the way we look as well. It changes the way we perceive. I mean, literature is life. So once you have a way of looking at literature in a way in which you can see yourself, your Orisha, your power, your spirituality, it changes the way you look at the entire world.
Absolutely.
Your Orisha in everything, and you're like, oh, but check your man. Oh, yeah, getting on bad today. What is this? And And it's an empowering, awakening consciousness to come to, and I really look forward to it.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. The other thing about the patakis, just before we come to Ade, is the way in which so a lot of the proverbial knowledge is also embedded inside of that.
Yeah.
Way that we use proverbs as vehicles for wisdom and for teaching. Yes, themselves as well as the proverbs that are there, what's reflecting the lives that we live, because proverbs come out of real existence.
Experience,
It's not idealistic. Yeah. Good. Very, very, very good work. Good work. We look forward to what it is you're doing. We'll come back to that in a bit. Yes, Ade.
Yeah. Interesting.
Your turn.
You want to comment on anything that Janique said about her work?
I could sort of it's very interesting. Even the last part about identifying the Orisha and everything in life. I would also say identifying yourself in everything in life as well, because we are also the Orisha. I guess for those who understand the tradition and understand what is the energy, energy and the principles of the Orisha, and these principles that connect to our path and our destiny. So in essence, the patakis are like children of the Odu for me.
Yeah.
I would say that the patakis is what the Odus gave birth to. A way to communicate knowledge and understanding, and to identify ourselves, or the Orisha within ourselves, on our paths, on our destiny, and our journeys, and the way that we have to go or we are going. And that sort of takes me into my work and what I'm doing with Oribata. So you have the Pataki and you have the Odu. And under the Odus are divination. And we can see the Patakis as children of the Odu, where you find these stories that you can identify in your human self, in your human nature. You can make those comparisons and those parallels to your lives and your path, your ways, your traits, your attributes, your characteristics, your mannerisms, your attitudes, your different dispositions, your most heightened emotions. If you're aggressive, if you're sad, if you're a happy person, if you're, and you get to identify. The work of Oribata is to not so much connect to the Orisha as the Orishas in Ogun or Shango or Oya, but to connect to the Orisha as in the energy and the element, identifying those energies within yourself internally, and what are these energies? What are the emotions connected to these energies? What are the levels? What are the frequencies? So Oribata is Trinidad and Tobago Orisha dance and performance 3-aspect technique, but it is not limited to dance and performance. It is for anyone who chooses to commit to a process wherein they would find themselves or identify these elements within themselves and their lives and their environment. Identify the Oshun in their lives, the Oshun as part of their energy and their existence. Identify the Ogun in their situations, you know, identify the Oya period of their life. You do that. You do that by understanding the energy. What is this energy? What constitutes the energy of Oya? Does that represent? How can I identify with it? So the work of Oribata, through its technique, especially in the first aspect, which is a somatic meditational exercise movement practice, helps you to identify this or these energies within yourself. Within the process, it accesses several things, and it facilitates several things, like therapy, for one, understanding the use of exercise and movement and the voice with the aesthetics of the energy, and then further putting on the layers of identity and characteristic coming out of the tradition. You know, you identify all those things and you begin to tap into that, this movement practice and the voice and the breathing. So more or less what the work does is it removes these layers, firstly, of religion. It removes the layers of ethnicity. It removes the layers of tradition. And the idea, as it is stated, dance and performance, theater or theater arts, becomes the tool or the platform that then creates a safe space for investigation, where you don't feel as though it doesn't impose ethnicity or religion, all these things, but it creates this safe space where you can identify with these elements in a very natural human way that does not, religion does not identify, or religion is not the thing that really constitutes this energy, you know? So the work brings you to a place through the process to identify your emotions, the elements as in earth, air, fire, water, what you feel, what that is, how you connect to it naturally. As I would say in some of my sessions, the sun is hot. This is normal human language and normal human experience. The sun is hot. And you would say the sun is hot. But within the tradition, a people have given that sun and that feeling identity and character. And they would say, Shango, oh Shango, Shango is out today, you know? And naturally you might say, okay, oh gosh, you know, better go to the river. And that's a normal human thing, or go to the sea, because in your natural human experience, you go to the water for some type of coolness, some type of refreshment, some type of recreation. So, you know, that you have all these different elements. And I show people how you connect to these things. But within the tradition, and then I face by the layers of the tradition, and I would say, okay, yes, you feel to go to the river because the sun is hot. Because you understand if you go to the river, you would feel cool, you would feel refreshed. And then I put on the layer of the tradition and I say, okay, according to the tradition, our people have been able to identify and bring character to this river and what you feel as Oshun. You know, the water is sweet, it's cool, it's refreshing, it is beautiful. You know, so that's what the work does. It's about becoming in tune with oneself consciously, becoming awakened, and being aware of yourself consciously, understanding that all these things exist unconsciously and consciously to you as well. But within this process is to bring you to this awareness, for you to be conscious of it. In becoming conscious of it, it changes your perspective and the way in which you view life. You look at yourself. It changes the way in which you look at your experiences. It changes the way in which you look at your environment. As Janique would have said, you begin to identify, because you understand the energy, and then you understand the identity and characteristics that a tradition has been able to place on it. You would now identify the energy within your environment and your experience, identify Oshun in your experience and your environment. You would identify the Ogun in this situation, because it's a war, it's a battle, something is happening.
These strategies.
And because you understand this, just as the religion, or just as the way of life, or just as the tradition, because you now understand the principles, the characteristics of this or these elements, you develop what is called communication, which is also a part of the use of the Pataki. To create a type of communication by identifying this within the stories within the Pataki, the stories within yourself, and you begin to have conversations. So the work of itself brings about these conversations with yourself, your environment, humanity, all that exists around you, and to be able to communicate with all of this, just as the tradition is able to communicate with all of this, communicate with life.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Sorry, go ahead, Janique. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's something that Adeola is touching on there about what I call the phenomena of the Orisha. I thought the phenomena of Eshuelegwa, because I think that the Orisha are so much more complex than a lot of, I'm going to use the word us broadly, understand and accept. Because there is as Adeola was referring to, the physical representation slash manifestation of the Orisha. But there's also the psychology, the mindset that comes with embodying, manifesting, or having the ability to connect with particular Orisha of the 4-1 at a particular time. It's being aware of and empowered by the ability to communicate, to connect with which of the 4. One needs to connect with your Ori at this moment to be your highest self, to bring yourself to your highest Ori in order to achieve what must be achieved moment by moment as we go through this journey. I think that idea of phenomena, the Orisha's phenomena, Ifa as phenomena, will keep us all very, they talk about mindfulness now, very mindful.
Yeah.
All the time. We're working with them. They're working with us always.
Yeah.
Beautiful, Adi. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Adi. Thank you.
Yes, it's very important work, because work is returning us to the starting point. The whole system of Orisha, of African spirituality, recognizes the oneness of being. Yeah? Other systems do that too. The yoga system does that. It's about the oneness of being. We are involved in creation. We are part of creation. Creation is part of us. And what happens is, as we live, we tend to see a separation between the material world and the spiritual world and so on. And always in the trying to find that balance. That's why we talk about Uriopu. We talk about our self that is in room. We talk about our Ori, our manifested self, and we talk about Ori, you know, which is our sense of the world as well, our extension. And the balance that we see, the identification with all of that is very much part of the starting point. What you're doing is providing a methodology for us to reconnect, for us to make those connections. Yeah. And in a sense, they're there, but it's to make them manifest. And you're doing that by ritual in a way, by shedding religion, as you say, by shedding ethnicity and getting to the core, the universality and the oneness. All right, in the Eastern tradition, they talk about it, they call it yoga. Yoga is that union, that unity, the oneness being. And in our tradition, because we feel that in our Yoruba tradition, that we have meditation, that it's all about dance and performance and drumming. It's all, yeah. What you're saying is that the different energies will take us to different places, right? Bring us in. We can be meditative and reflective. We can be therapeutic. It can lead us to self-knowledge wherever.
Yes.
Harnessing those energies that are in fact part of us.
Yes. Yeah. All of that is the root. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Very good. Very good work. I think that we are. I would use the term connection rather than communication, Adi, because it's so much stronger. Janique used it, and I think it tells us what it's about. Right? Connection, in the sense that it is part of us, and it's to reconnect with that. And Janique, I mean, my other comment on your own work is you didn't mention drama at all when you're talking about Santería. And I would like
I think that's a plays.
Okay.
As a coach, she plays
because
stories and now. Yes, of course.
Very good. I wonder if you're talking to Rawle Gibbons and you mentioned drama.
I actually said, I recognize this. Yes. When you watch the video, you'll see it. Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, because the work there's so much that is so performative, you know, in terms of that you're talking about. The patakis, they lend themselves so readily to theater. You know?
Of course.
Okay, beautiful.
And just to add to that, and in the process of the work, I use elements or the stories of the Pataki in explaining connection. In the work, I use it in explaining connection because, okay, you're hearing a story about Shango and Ogun and Oshun, and I bring it back to the earth and to the physical element, as in, you know, air and fire and water, and showing that there is always this, most of the stories about the relationship between the Orishas, within the Patakis, I've been able to connect them to the natural relationship of the elements of themselves, how they work, how they live through the earth, and how the spring comes up, and when the rain falls, and so then you understand it is Oshun, and then we have Unile, and then we have Ogun, and I use all those things as well to connect in explaining relationship of energy, the relationship of these things that you feel, the relationship of the emotions, and all these things you explore through your body and movement.
I can see that.
What's that, Jenny?
I said, yeah, I can see that. I can.
Right, yeah.
For example, he's talking, and I'm thinking about the Pataki, where Oshun goes into the forest to bring out Ogun, because he's isolated himself for lack of respect, due to lack of respect of the people. And I'm thinking of Ogun as strategist. So you're talking about physical phenomena and representation, but I'm also thinking about them, as I was saying before, as multi-phenomena, right?
Yeah.
Existing intellectually, as well as physically, as well as emotionally, as well as spiritually, right? So I'm thinking that when we need strategy, what must we do? we must take ourselves apart. We must find ourselves isolated. We should give ourselves over to reflection and refreshment and rejuvenation. Give ourselves over to Mama Oshun, and have her slowly bring the strategy out of us. Because when you're ready to go to war, some of us just want to pick up a double-sided axe and run in. But Ogun is a different kind of warrior. Yeah? So when we go into war, it's a reminder almost about the slow but steady and impactful effect of rain, of water and a stone.
Yes.
Once we give ourselves to that mindfulness, to that meditation,
Yes.
to that presence, to that connection, we can then very gradually and in a sweet way with honey, in a sweet way, bring ourselves to the point of, okay, this is the plan, this is the strategy.
Yes.
And you don't go in rash and unprepared. Yes, I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I love it. I think it's really beautiful. Yeah. It adds yet another layer.
Mm-hmm.
As I've been conducting thus far. Thanks, Ariola. Just what I need.
Thank you so much, Janique. Thank you.
Thank
you. I am feeding off of what you're saying and making the connections, and it's so important. You know, this identifying, the work is so much, it takes on so much the idea of identifying these things. You know, you first have to really identify with it in order to connect it consciously, you know, to connect it consciously.
As simple as a thing, all of us would have grown up with our elders saying, my mind did tell me so.
Yeah.
Look how simple it is now that we could say, Ori led me. And it means so much more. It means it says that we are connected to the 401 root. It means that we are one of the Omo. A simple phrase like Ori led me. How you end up here no longer I see you? Ori led me.
Yeah, my mind that tell me, you know, I was my mind that tell me to walk with the umbrella. Look, the rain come and rain. I should have told my mind.
But yeah, it's part of the work is giving the tools, the words, so we could reclaim, unmask, reclaim, identify. What's the kind of language?
Yeah.
As we are now, based on where we've come from. Part of that is the language. I have quoted. I'm coining a term, Mr. Rawle Gibbons, Ifatong. You were talking about how when you went to Cuba, your Spanish was A-level. But when you got into the ritual, you spoke the language. Ifatong is what we speak. Yeah. You could drop Omo Trinidadian, Omo Cuban, Omo Trinidadian, Omo in Brazil. You don't speak a word of Portuguese. When the airballs start, oh, we chant. Oh, I know that song.
Yeah.
This, yeah. You understand that we have, I think the words, as we all know, there's a reason we chant in Yoruba. It's carry power. And what we're doing is giving the OB.
Yeah. I also have a different opinion on that as well too. Apart from the language, I also believe like what Mr. Gibbons would have experienced also has to do with intention of where he was and what was taking place. So that the language is one thing verbally, but I also believe in the power of intention, because in some traditions we may not understand exactly what each word may mean or translate to, especially in Trinidad and Tobago, but the intention of that song or that chant, and when it is being sung or chanted, and where and how, the intention also plays a big part in what manifests. So apart from the word, the verbal word of itself, I believe intention also creates connection and vibration and these types of manifestations that makes us one or brings us into one.
Agree.
Understand everything that's being said, but because we are there and we understand this intention, we become connected beyond the tongue or beyond the word.
I agree. I agree. I think that the sharing of the language will open yet another path for us to proceed upon. And I'm not talking about everybody becoming Yoruba, fluent in Yoruba, that's not what I mean. But to have the Ifa tongue, the key terms. So when I say Odu, you know what I mean? Like all of us know what Ashe is. Yeah. So that we understand core ideas that may otherwise be difficult to explain or to try to translate. I've seen all sorts of weird translations for Ashe. All sorts of strange things happening here, and Ori and Orun and Olofi, yeah, because there's the inability to translate fluently and easily the spirit of the thing. So I completely agree with you. I believe intention is potent, especially in the absence of language. But I think also that on acquiring the language, one word at a time, that's how you build a house.
Yeah.
One word at a time, we open another road that we can dance along as a people.
Yeah.
Right. And there's so much that is our own, that is innate. I like Alia's word in that sense. In the business about innate recognition and so on. You know that chant Shilekun. Our ancestral Suwa Olua. You know, that was discovered by Funsho Ayegina among Orisha people here, our spiritual mother, Iya Bukbo. She was singing it. Funsho is a Yoruba speaker, of course, he's Yoruba. And
yes,
it. He said, but it's perfect Yoruba. Right? So he recorded it, translated it, and made it available to the whole community. But it comes here. You understand? So I'm saying that there are certain things that we practice, that we recognize, almost innately, as it were. And that's important. What I like about what the work that you're doing, both of you, in which you're in fact creating. You are looking at a creative process. You're engaged in a creative process. That, because I feel that is very much what is required, if you will, of us. Not just documentation, but creation, because we have to situate ourselves as a civilization, as part of an ongoing process, as we know, of creativity. When you mentioned Janique, that Pataki about going into the forest, Oshun coming, taking him, enticing him with honey to re-emerge. What happened with that Pataki as well is that when he went into the forest, all the implements became rusted because he was not there.
correct.
Not able to re-energize so much of life. That's why she and what one has speculated, if you will, is that when one comes back out from the forest, the result of his re-emergence, his encounter with his own people who have been asking for him to come out of the forest, takes us into the story of the creation of new energy, new metallic energy in the form of steel band. So
the wine of astonishment.
No, this is my work.
Yes,
this is my work, Ogunayan, that he emerges specifically out of that Pataki. When he comes back to civilization, to greet people, there's people who have crossed over the water and who have been asking for him to come back. Where are you? We are in distress. When he comes back out, his manifestation is through this new form. And because it is Oshun who brings him back out. Love, and who is dance, and who is music as well, brings all of that energy into the creation of this thing that we know, that we call pan, steel pan. So I'm saying that the way in which the energies manifest and the responsibility in terms of our own civilization remains in terms of the creative application, which you're engaging it, you're taking it further, you're exploring it, yes? And you're building upon it, so that people, wherever they come from, can come from Africa, they can come from Yoruba land, and still have to learn about Orisha in the diaspora. Through the work that is ongoing. That's the task that we have, I think, as a civilization. It's all for us. We wanted to end really our concluding part had to do with how we look, how we see the future, how we see from moving from this point on. You've covered, but let's just talk a little bit about it. How we now we're in a situation where, as we say, the things have come to a head. The movements that we engaged in, that we charted, Lives Matter and so on, the reparations movement, crossroads and whatnot. We're at this crossroads really, and hear about spirituality. Do you see, what is the role you see of spirituality in the path forward?
Who you want to go first? You direct it to.
It's an open question. It's an open question. It's you know.
I think it brings us full circle, at least for me, to how we started about what is Black consciousness, and my response about it being love and love of self, and therefore because of love of self, love of environment, and love of community. And I think that's what spirituality can continue to bless us with as we proceed along this journey, and as we take what is ours into a new kind of light, which is something I really want to point out. I mean, yes, your creative work, for example, Adeola's creative work, your articles, the academics who are now featuring IFA, but what's even more important, that they are themselves Omo Ifa, and therefore bringing Ifa, the tradition, this kind of spirituality to a different kind of light, and therefore giving it making it more accessible for a broader audience to learn the philosophy, principles of Ifa, which brings me right back, as I said before, to the concept of love. Humanity is in desperate need of love, of learning to love each other, which I think is based in not being able to love themselves first. So I think that the spirituality of Ifa, and as a mother system, can permeate through literature, through theater, through the arts, through dance, into real life applications of how we see ourselves, and therefore how we treat with others, allowing for a really hopeful future.
Yeah. Ade, how are you?
Oh, so you put that so well, Janique. I'm almost lost for words.
You never.
But spirituality and how that moves us forward. Or where do I see spirituality taking us? But firstly, I should say that I see the artist as a spiritual person, I see myself as a spiritual person, not by tradition or religion, but innately. And as an artist, I see myself as being spiritual. I am spiritual, and the work that I do is spiritual. And I believe strongly that the true artist, I might say the true artist, or the true work of the artist is to serve humanity, in reflecting life, in being a issue, in showing choice and consequences, in being a issue, in being a voice at the crossroads of decisions, in being a issue as being a mediator between all that is. I see that as the work of the artist, and I see that as being spiritual. So in essence, spirituality is the thing that really breaks all boundaries for me. It breaks the boundary of religion, ethnicity, race, even tradition.
Classism.
Everything, sex, size, sexuality, everything, it breaks, it goes beyond all of that. So humanity embracing spirituality, I see it as a key or a driving force in going forward in life.
Yeah.
Artists being a tool or one of the tools to help create and bring about the consciousness, that type of spiritual consciousness, through his or her work. And I see spirituality taking us forward.
Good. Spirituality, love, and the recognition that because everything is Ifa and Ifa is everything.
Ashe.
It means that even when it is not identified as such, that it's happening. When we embrace one another, when people move together as community in love, in partnerships, and all of that, to what good, when people move together to what good, when we reach out to the next person, Ifa is happening.
Ashe.
Ifa is happening.
Ashe.
Where love is, there is Ifa.
Ashe.
Unity, where there is unity, there is Ifa.
Ashe.
Work against all divisions. Ashe. I don't know do we take questions, Erica? Or I don't know or do we wrap up?
There are no questions.
What time like?
There were no questions really, a lot of comments, commendations. So you can do your closing remarks and wrap up before we close off. Thank you.
Okay. Well, let me ask whether there are any. What do we want to leave or really? Janique and Adi. Why wrap up? Final statements we'd like to leave with.
Yeah.
We've Janique has emphasized love a great deal as the driving force, spirituality. Right? We've covered a great deal of ground. Covered the journeys, personal journeys. We've looked at the whole notion of Black consciousness and where we are and so on, and really seen the depth and the possibility of the work that both Janique and Ade are involved in. Is there any other closing statement you'd like to make?
I would like to say, Modupe, thank you to everyone who's come out, attendees to support. So many of them I know. Thank you very much for coming out to support. For those who will be watching this later on, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for connecting with us, for having a drive that is parallel to ours to move, because this is how community is born. This is how community is born. We share a philosophy and a core ambition, and we work together towards that goal. As you said, unity. Where there's unity, there's Ifa. And thank you to you, of course, Rawle Gibbons, for hosting us. Thank you to the Black Consciousness Festival for having us. Thank you to Adi, you're always a light in every room. And thank you to the people. And I would just say that we should find ways to connect as communities, diverse communities, and continue the conversation and continue finding ways to manifest Ifa, to manifest love and unity for ourselves, for our children, for our families, for our communities.
Ashe. Ade?
I would also like to say thanks to the organizers of the Black Consciousness Festival. Thanks to Janique, my sister, for sharing in this experience. Thanks to you, Mr. Gibbons. After working with you several times, and I remember so clearly since 2008, the first time I experienced Ogunayan as in Pan, and that led to our relationship. Thanks for being a mentor and guiding me and giving me the blessing of doing what I'm doing, where I am now today in this work. You know, you were one of those voices that, along with Marvin George, that said, right, I'll never forget it, you know. I thank you so much, and it's an honor to be within your presence on this panel. Thanks to Erica and to Heather and my next brother, Sean. And to all the viewers and all who will be viewing this at whatever point, thank you so much for viewing and participating. So many thoughts going through my head, but I am so grateful for this opportunity. And I believe strongly in the mysterious and miraculous way that the universe works. And I believe strongly in that this is the work of the ancestors, and the ancestors have made this path for all of us to connect at different points in our lives, even onto our great, you know, we have multiple destinies connected, you know. I give thanks to all of that, and I'm so grateful for being on this journey with you, and I just want to give thanks. I am really appreciative of this. Thank you.
Ashe. I see someone there asking about how do we connect and so on. Well, I suppose that can be done through the festival itself, the Black Consciousness Festival. You can find out more, and they can put you in contact with any of us you'd like to reach. I want to thank you both. I mean, this has really been a very enlightening conversation. You know, it's great to be in contact again, Ade, and to find out what you're doing, and Janique, to meet you at work. Wonderful. Very positive. Very positive. I would like to say that to remind us that the things that link us, that make us a civilization, from Brazil in the south to New Orleans, you know, really our history, our legacy of Africa, which encompasses everything. Africa doesn't leave anyone out. Humankind started in Africa. Let's take it from that point of view. Humanity first walked the earth in Africa. Africa encompasses all.
Yeah.
So Africa is the foundation of the civilization. From Brazil to New Orleans. That Africa is expressed in terms of our celebration, the that we place on freedom. Because freedom for all people was first achieved in Haiti. It wasn't achieved anywhere else. In the New World, it was first achieved in Haiti. We had Dessalines declared that in 1804, 1805, that all Haitians, whatever color you are black. That was not anything that was encompassed in any other part of the New World. So we celebrate freedom. And we do so in celebrating that freedom from Bahia to New Orleans. We do that in this public space, in the streets of the city. Wherever we are, this marks us, our civilization. And that celebration is a triumph of the human spirit. You talk about love, that is what it is. The triumph of the human spirit. Out all the struggles that we have endured, the human spirit triumphs, survives and rises. That's why we do carnival. That's why we do what we do in the streets. Wherever we go, whether in London, whether in Australia, whether in South Africa, wherever we go, we bring it out into the streets. Spirit. That is Ifa too. That is everything, everything is Ifa.
Sure.
That marks our civilization and our creativity. I want to emphasize that as we close. The role of our creativity, which both of you embody, which I'm sure that so many of our audience also embody and respond to. So we give thanks finally to all of the participants, to both of you, my friends, guests, to the, of course, the organizers, Erica, Sean, Heather, okay, and beautiful people behind this wonderful effort. And we give thanks finally, as we open with the ancestors. We thank them for guiding us through this, having their voices, making their voices heard. The ancestors and the Orisha, who walked us through the journey of this discourse and who brought us safely to the space where we are.
And my heart is filled with joy and love and gratitude. And I am just in awe. Mr. Gibbons, thank you so much for your wisdom and your sharing and your openness to leading this panel and leading this important discussion on African spirituality. Ade and Janique, I mean, beauty in operation, beauty in sharing, generosity. You are appreciated and loved. And Ade, it is only the ancestors could have made this happen at this point in time. So we're giving all praise and thanks to the ancestors. And again, on this day, this Black Consciousness Day, we just give thanks. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And we keep the connections. So coming up next, we have our next conversation at 2 p.m., which is in a short while, starting with Heather is leading that conversation where we're going to be talking with young Brazilians. We have 2 young Brazilians on that panel, and they are going to be talking and sharing how they connect with their African ancestry. O dia da consciência, yeah, negra, Black Consciousness Day. We thank you. Give thanks always. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bravo.
Bravo. We'll be in touch. We'll be in touch. Yes? There, Janique. Oh, Bravo. Okay. Much love.